For its entire 33-year history, competitive NES Tetris has been defined by barriers, ones that would take several years and dozens of elite players to move past. On June 30th, 2021, what was thought to be the last score barrier was broken on video, and after that, classic Tetris was never the same again. This is the story of what it took to turn that barrier into nothing but a relic of the past, the players who made it possible, and why it wasn't actually the first of its kind. If you liked the video, consider subscribing to the channel, it helps me out a lot. Anyways, let's take a look back. On December 28th, 2019, reigning world champ Joseph Saley was the first to break the elusive 1.3 barrier that several top players have been fighting to break for almost 3 years up to that point. Right as it was broken though, a new threshold for top players quickly emerged. This was because Joseph didn't just surpass the 1.3 mark, he almost overshot it, coming up just 43,000 points short of a 1.4. This was a feat that some of the top players thought would be impossible for even the most elite competitors at the time, and to understand why that is, it's necessary to consider the limitations of the A-type mode of NES Tetris. For maximum points, a typical high-level game of NES Tetris starts on level 18, the second highest starting level in an unmodified version of the game. Here, there are two critical phases of the game where points can be reliably scored. The first is 130 lines of level 18 play, where pieces fall at a rate of 1 row every 3 frames. At the end of this portion, the level jumps up to 19, and now progresses at a rate of 1 level every 10 lines instead of 130. Pieces are now falling a third faster, and this remains the case through 9 additional levels. Upon entering level 29 though, the speed once again increases, only this time to a rate of 1 frame per unit down the board, making it twice as difficult to get pieces to the side as before. This blistering piece velocity made level 29 the ending point for a large majority of the game's history, but there were ways to work around it. As demonstrated by players such as Joseph himself, a playstyle that involved manually pressing the D-pad in quick succession allowed for pieces to get to the side much faster than the built-in system. This is hyper-tapping, and it was the crucial strategy that helped carry scores into the 1.3 millions in the first place. For a 1.4 though, it was just barely within the realm of possibility at the time, limited instead by the game's finite amount of lines to score on. As mentioned, the game of NES Tetris is more of a race rather than a marathon, and so efficiency within the confined space is prioritized more when going for top scores. The way to score in the most efficient manner is by creating a 4x9 stack of blocks on the board, and using a long bar to clear all 4 rows at once. This move of a Tetris is the highest scoring on any given level, and its value continues to go up at a flat rate, with a Tetris into level 29 being worth 36,000 points total. The constraint is that chaining Tetrises over the course of an entire game is infeasible, as the randomness of piece distribution makes it so that players are almost always forced to burn down their stack when met with a prolonged sequence of no long bars, or they're forced to compromise their board in a manner that eats up scoring potential. However, as the skill ceiling and player base both grew, stacking and efficiency both improved as a result. Tetris perfection was still out of reach though. A game played to maximize on all point scoring before level 29 ends up at a value just above 1.5 million, so a score even 100,000 below still required flawless play in every facet of the game. A realistic slice of scoring would be 700,000 points before and after the transition at 130 lines, and in fact, Joseph's first 1.3 did achieve this for the post-transition phase, but that was due to some extra assistance, which brings us to the second option for achieving a 1.4. After crossing the 1.3 mark, Joseph continued to score into the kill screen, tacking on an extra 41,000 points to his record score. The hyper-tapping playstyle that Joseph was using also allowed him to just barely get the pieces to the sides at level 29 speeds, which opens up a new avenue for how a 1.4 can be achieved. The problem with this is that with hyper-tapping, the ability to sustain a low kill screen board quickly runs into problems, making it not as reliable, especially at the end of a high-scoring game. As Joseph had proven though, it was possible to tack on meaningful points past level 29, with him and others working on improving this capability alongside their efficiency skills. Despite several top players dismissing the prospects of a 1.4 and labeling it as infeasible, it seemed like it was within grasp, but the scene wasn't ready for how quickly it would materialize. This image made waves around the classic Tetris scene, showing what appeared to be the first ever 1.4 by none other than Joseph himself. The one caveat was that despite the impressive and previously thought to be impossible feat, he hadn't recorded it. The reason for this is actually somewhat comical. Earlier in the very same session, Joseph had achieved the level 18 score record with a 1.38, and had forgotten to turn his recording back on before casually getting the new record just a few games later, which is honestly just a massive flex on Joseph's part. According to witnesses in a Discord call with him right as he achieved this feat, He had put up nearly 100,000 points past level 29, which when paired up with incredibly efficient pre-kill screen play was enough to send him into uncharted territory. Joseph's massive catalog of documented records and world champ status made it so that there was little doubt that he had accomplished the score legitimately. With no video proof though, it left a blemish on the record, and despite community acknowledgement, Joseph didn't want to claim the record based on screenshot proof alone. This began a new journey, a quest for the first ever recorded 1.4, and this would end up being a much longer endeavor for elite players in the scene. Joseph's 1.4 was clearly ahead of its time, and in the months to follow, several players would join the 1.3 club, but none were able to break through the elusive new barrier afterwards. The stage was set, but the anomalous nature of a score that high would once again become the main roadblock. The main thing preventing elite players from matching Joseph's score was simply how abnormal both the pre and post killscreen phases were. The claimed 100k post 29 was not unheard of, but at the time it was definitely anomalous, as in 2020 there had only been a handful of games where this happened, with none of those being in a position to achieve a world record score. This leads us to the second piece of the puzzle, entering the kill screen with a high enough score in the first place. This alone is rare, but with conventional hypertapping, piling on the needed points after 29 is not a given. The limits of top players were still expanding though, so it seemed like it was inevitable for a player to combine both crucial aspects needed for a 1.4 into one record-breaking game. Team killscreen pace still lingered for a time, but the consensus grew that it would take killscreen play to put the first recorded 1.4 over the top. That intuition would prove to be correct, but likely not in the way that people had first imagined. While other elite players were working on maximizing efficiency, several community members were searching for a solution that would change the way that high-level Tetris was played. Cheese was one of those people, and if you're familiar with the story, you know that it wouldn't take long for his revolutionary idea to sweep across the entire classic Tetris scene. He used a fluid finger motion on the opposite side of the controller, achieving rapid D-pad inputs with little space in between the button presses, resulting in the fastest piece movement possible for a Nintendo controller. This was a step above hypertapping, with the scene adopting the term rolling shortly after it was shared to the public. This caused the technique to go viral in the months to follow, but early on Cheese struggled with managing the playstyle's gaps in consistency. This can be attributed to how volatile the technique can be, with several more variables compared to just hypertapping with one finger. This meant that for a while, Cheese only attempted to harness the playstyle's utility on the kill screen, the one place where it had a clear and definite advantage. And it was here that the signs of promise for the technique grew. Cheese used a modified ROM to practice on level 29 starts, quickly setting the record for the most points scored in the mode. If he was able to chain that sort of kill screen performance onto any above average score into the kill screen, he had the potential to be the first to have a recorded 1.4. He came agonizingly close several times, and after a few months, he'd go on to do the impossible. During the very start of his livestream qualifier for the July Classic Tetris Monthly Tournament, Cheese would go on to have this game. He transitioned to level 19 just below 600,000, entered level 29 with just a mid 1.1 million, and proceeded to endure the kill screen while still scoring Tetrises. The advantage of rolling showed its full strength, with Cheese easily piling on additional points and getting out of what would have typically been game-ending boards. Just a few levels later, he was one Tetris away from the elusive 1.4, and with the nerves building, he sold out his stack while waiting for a long bar, but he wouldn't have to wait for long. He'd go on to top Joseph's unrecorded score, and topped out with an unfathomable 1.46 million. The slices of scoring for each phase of the game looked drastically different than any other record before it, and this would usher in a new era for the game, nearly 1 year after the first 1.4. However, it turned out that this wasn't the first recorded 1.4, and if you read the title, this was not the record that changed Tetris forever. For that, we have to go back a week and a half.
What?
Let's
go! Oh my god!
Much like his 1.46, this one also featured extensive kill screen play, including some edge-of-death dig situations almost halfway up the screen. Unlike with his score record though, this was the actual first 1.4 to be captured on video, with all but a few people in VC with Cheese being unaware that the feat over a year in the making had been accomplished. What were his motives for hiding the record? Well, all was revealed just recently when Cheese was featured in an interview for the Classic Tetris Monthly YouTube channel.
And then, you revealed that you actually had 1.4 before, but I just never released it. How come you didn't release that video? Like, because it was a big deal.
I don't remember exactly like the full context, but Doge posted this meme. He said that the first 1.4 would happen on like a certain day, so I was going to plan to post it on that day, just to see how he would react.
Yes, Cheese had been planning to hold on to the record for a full month just to fulfill a joke post, but the plan was cut short. It might be safe to say that while a 1.4 with rolling was inevitable, Cheese wouldn't have gotten this live for all to see if not for getting one just a few days prior, likely calming the nerves of the barrier and bolstering his killscreen rolling confidence. In the following months, we saw several themes from that 1.4 continue, which leads us to the present day. The score world record only continued to climb following the 1.4, and rolling is the sole reason. Killscreen play became vastly more accessible, and with subsequent records, it became a requirement to score post 29 in order to get anything close to a top score. We're seeing games where gameplay after level 29 is in excess of 15 minutes now, effectively making the game much more of a test of endurance. One other theme would persist to the current day, that being Cheese and his vaulting of records. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but Cheese is now known for keeping his achievements relatively unknown. As he would go on to explain though, Cheese says he doesn't feel the need to showcase every achievement he manages to get.
I just play the game for fun, honestly. Like, I don't want to feel the need to prove myself to people. I don't know.
And I think that's respectable. Always being in the public eye can definitely take away from the game of classic Tetris, and Cheese has already been cemented as a legend of the game, so there's not much to prove at this point. He did respond to my joke comment asking if he had the record, and well, let's see if he ends up fulfilling my prophecy. Thank you so much for watching. This was a bit of a departure from my current event Tetris videos, but I think it's important to take a look back at Tetris history, especially when considering that the events to follow have all occurred in just the past 11 months. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I have plenty of Tetris videos just like this one.